Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman, one half of Luqman Nation, and welcome to another episode of Live in Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media anywhere. Listen, y'all, it's been an amazing weekend. A lot of stuff going on. I intentionally um, stayed off social media Saturday because I needed the rest and I just didn't want to get all caught up in the Nevada caucuses hype. But we're going to talk about the Nevada caucuses and why they are so important, why what happened there was so important, not so much because of Sanders' win, but because of what we needed to see from the Democratic Party. We needed to see their little meltdown. We're going to talk about some other things, the difference between progressivism and socialism, and why we need to back away from this cult of Bernie Sanders thing. It's kind of dangerous, and ideologically speaking, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. But before we get into any of the meat and potatoes of this broadcast, I want to thank you all so much for your support. Mr. Luqman and I are very appreciative of all of our friends and followers. We really, really appreciate how you have supported us and you have encouraged us and been with us this whole way, ride or die. We appreciate it. So we're asking, if you have not become a patron of Luqman Nation, we're asking you to consider becoming a patron of Luqman Nation. You can do that through Patreon. You can find us on patreon.com under LuqManNation. $3, $5, $7 a month, or whatever you can do. Every little bit helps and counts. I can tell you that this is true. Again, because of your support, we were able to do another equipment upgrade, and I'll tell you about it when we install it. But I want to thank you for your help. We continue to need your support. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope that you have some tea. Got my big cup of tea. Mm. I want to shout out my friend Jessie Fairs Cunningham, who sent me um, Bengal spice tea. She sent me some, and I had never seen it in the stores before. It's Celestial Seasonings Bengal, Bengal spice tea. Jessie Fairs Cunningham, thank you so much, girl. That tea is the bomb. I've had an upper respiratory kind of cold sinus thing going on for about 3 weeks. And I got this tea. She sent me this tea. It is amazing. It has helped keep my sinuses clear. It has helped keep the stuff flowing out of my lungs the way it should be. So, y'all, thank you so much for those of you who have sent gifts for us. Somebody, I think it was Jessie also, who sent us a salt rock lamp. It's really wonderful. We love it. Thank you very much, Stevie, for sending the card, the birthday card that wasn't a birthday card because I had to create a new profile and didn't fill in my birthday, and my birthday was incorrectly reflected on Facebook. So Stevie sent me an early birthday card. Thank you, girl. I used that at Bed Bath and Body Works. Thank you, girl. I needed that. I appreciate that so much. So okay, already with the questions. So we're single screening. So I'm going to try to hop between platforms here and there. What's going on, Ron, over on our Facebook live stream? I see your question. I'm going to talk about what Ben Dixon is doing, because Ben Dixon did a really great thing, and the way that man was treated was foul. But over here on YouTube, what's going on? Lisa, Lene, Mad Black Star, Uncle Brother, yo, what's up, Uncle Brother? Look, y'all, I just have to tell you that I met Uncle Brother, and I did not know who he was when I met him. And when he told me who he was, I was so excited. Y'all, we are always excited to meet our friends and family on who follow us online. We connect with Lene all the time. She's in the area, but it is a special blessing. It's not even a pleasure or a treat. it's a blessing for us to meet the people who we interact with online physically. It is a blessing for us. So I really, really appreciate everything that you all have done to support us. All right, let's get down to the nitty gritty, y'all, because I fried some chicken and I'm not going to talk to y'all all night long because I'm hungry. So Ron Williams over on Facebook asked about Ben Dixon and the work that he is doing in the Bernie campaign. Now, I don't know what Ben's role is in the Bernie Sanders campaign. I don't know if Ben has an official role in the Bernie Sanders campaign. I do know that Ben, excuse me, shared the video of Mike Bloomberg saying the incredibly racist things about stop and frisk and all the crime being in black neighborhoods. And yes, stop and frisk was needed to be implemented because, yes, all the cops needed to be in the black neighborhoods because that's where all the crime was. And yes, that's what you do. You throw these kids up against the wall because they have all the guns. Well, it turned out all of that, aside from that being an incredibly racist commentary on crime and black folk and where we live, as opposed to crime and white people, as if white people don't ever commit crime. The statistics for stop and frisk that eventually led to the practice's demise in New York City, it has been ruled unconstitutional. The statistics bore out that 90% of the young black men and women stopped under stop and frisk had no contraband on them, no drugs, no guns, no nothing. So all this idea about, yeah, we have to stop all the black people in the black neighborhoods because that's where all the crime is, turned out to be a complete lie. The statistics of the program bore that out. Now, black people knew that all along. It's not as if there is no crime in neighborhoods where black people live because, poverty breeds crime. You know that, right? So there is also crime in neighborhoods where there are a bunch of white people who are poor. And there are plenty of neighborhoods in New York City with poor white people. But there wasn't a whole lot of stop and frisk in those neighborhoods, now were there? No, there was not. So to answer your question directly, Ron, I don't know what Ben's role in the Bernie Sanders campaign is. I don't think I really care. I think he is an independent journalist with a great deal of integrity. He stands by his beliefs, and whether you agree with him or not, he meaning Ben Dixon, he can always make the case for what he believes, and he backs down from no one. So I have a lot of respect for that brother, and I always will. So now, okay, let's get to Nevada, y'all. I told you I stayed off social media all Saturday because I really just needed a recharge, and I encourage y'all to do this, to just get the heck away from social media sometimes and just don't go on it, just for your own peace of mind, because I started to notice that I feel a lot more tense when I am online all the time and I'm engaged in these debates with people who honestly don't deserve that much of my mental space and that much of my time. So I was happy to learn of Bernie Sanders' commanding win in Nevada. I was not surprised. I wasn't surprised because on By Any Means Necessary, last week sometime, we talked about how the Sanders coalition from 2016 stayed in a lot of the states, and they continued to organize, they continued to canvass, they continued to do outreach in those communities that were not paid any attention to or paid too little attention to by the establishment Democrat candidates in 2016 and by Bernie Sanders. Let me be clear, y'all. Sanders is not getting a pass on his weak ground game in certain neighborhoods in certain areas from 2016 in Black and Latino and poor. So at least it seems like he learned his lesson in that regard And if he didn't learn his lesson, then his campaign teams certainly did. And they stuck around in these states. They did in Iowa, they did in New Hampshire, and they certainly did in Nevada. There was this huge deal about the I think the largest union in Nevada, the culinary union didn't, the head of the culinary union didn't back Bernie Sanders, but the employees in the union, they did. So listen, there's a lot to be said about the efficacy of grassroots outreach. You have got to go knock on doors. If you are launching a political campaign, and I've learned this myself over the years, having a relationship with serious organizers like Anoa Shanga, who breaks it down all the time, and other people who are doing stuff locally in Baltimore and in other states, Melissa Figueroa, and other people who are always constantly doing the work, and not for a political party, not for the Democratic Party, certainly not for the Republican Party, but they're constantly in the streets with the people, interacting with the people, doing what Kwame Ture said, implementing that consistent, perpetual political education that needs to be done. If you don't do that, people are not going to vote for you. If you are not willing to be on the ground, engaging with people, knocking on doors, having conversations with people who you want to vote for your candidate, those people are not going to vote for your candidate. Somebody learned that from 2016 in the Sanders campaign, and I do believe that his win in Nevada was a result of that. His win in New Hampshire was a result of that. And I don't care what anybody says, Bernie Sanders did win Iowa. That's why they tried to implement this ridiculous little Lego Tinker Toy app that they tried to introduce at the last minute to count some caucus. But that was so ridiculous. But Nevada is important. It's an important milestone in the Democratic process, the Democratic primary process. And let me take my glasses off because I realize there's a glare. Sorry about that, y'all. Nevada is important in the Democratic primary process leading up to 2020 because America needs to see just how little the Democratic Party gives a shit about y'all. I know that we have been enjoying the meltdown that we have seen Chris Matthews and James Carville, who I've always hated. I never could stand that smug ass James Carville. And you know, all of the Democratic pundits, how they're just melting down. They're just losing their minds. You got Jason Johnson calling black women who support Bernie Sanders the girls from the island of misfit black girls. What the I mean, I understand, okay, if you have a problem with the passion with which some supporters will support their candidate, but that kind of misogynistic, hateful, honestly, that's no better than white people in the Bernie bro bullshit. It's the same thing. It's just coming from a black guy, and it's crapping on black women, and that's unacceptable. And I don't care what kind of degrees this dude has. I don't care what class he teach. I don't care what university he is employed at. I don't care what kind of mainstream media check this dude gets. He reminds me that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And some of us will throw the others of us under any bus that's coming in order to protect their little bit of riches. And that's why we needed to see the Democratic establishment, pundits and talking heads and politicians. You got Auntie Maxine Waters talking about the Democratic Party isn't a socialist party. Thank you. Shout out to Erica Ryan on Facebook, who is the publisher of Hood Communist. I'm behind on sharing my weekly Hood Communist and Black Agenda Report articles, but shout out to Erica Ryan, who reminded me that Auntie Maxine Waters missed the Democratic Party isn't a socialist party. When she started in politics, She supported a candidate who was a communist. So yeah, please look that up. I'm not going to give you all the information. Shirley Chisholm wasn't the first black woman to ever run for president in the United States. There was a black woman before her, and the reason you don't hear about this woman was because she represented the Communist Party of the United States. Maxine Waters supported her in her presidential bid. Look it up. So now you got Maxine Waters, Auntie Maxine, everybody loves, sitting there talking about the Democratic Party isn't a socialist party. It's not like she's lying. She's right. It's not. It's indeed a very capitalist party. But the disdain for which she says it, with which she says it, like she's got this hatred for socialism. And this chick started her political career supporting an actual communist. So we've got people in the Democratic Party who are losing their minds over Bernie Sanders winning Nevada with the commanding double-digit lead that he did, not because they hate Bernie Sanders so much. Stop believing this stuff about it's personal and they hate Sanders and nobody likes him. No, it's not. It's because these are all rich people. All of them. They are all rich people who scared. They're scared that they're going to have to give up some of their money so that poor folks can have a little bit more of the nothing that we have right now. That's all this is. That's all this. These people in the Democratic Party are letting you know very plainly how much disdain they have for poor people in this country. That they actually equate the push for universal health care, eliminating student loan debt, which is at a rate that this country has never seen before. This country has never seen $1.4 trillion in student loan debt before, but we got it now. All these people who are sitting in the Democratic Party talking about, oh my God, how can we cancel student loan debt? These are all people who went to college when college was either free in states like California. Oh, y'all didn't know that college was free in some states before in this country? Y'all didn't know that? Yes. Some of these people in the Democratic Party are telling you with all of your 5 and 6 digit student loan debt that you can't have student loan debt relief, but they got their degree for little to nothing. They got their multiple degrees. They were able to work a part-time job and pay their college tuition because they either lived in a state where tuition didn't exist and all they paid were fees, or they lived in a state where tuition was so low that they could afford to work a part-time job or maybe a full-time job and pay their tuition as they went and graduated with no student loan debt. So now they sitting on their 6-figure salary, and some of them more than that, telling you that you can't have an affordable college education. But that's how they got where they are. And truth be told, some of those people don't have a college degree. And I'm certainly not sitting here making a judgment on whether people have a college degree or not, because I do not have a college degree. But the issue is not whether people have a college degree or not. The issue is, do we want to live in a country where you have to be rich in order to afford a college education? Do we want to live in a country where we prioritize the individual self-improvement of every citizen, regardless of whether they want a college degree from a 4-year institution or whether they want a technical certificate to do some other vocational things? Do we want to prioritize the ability for every citizen to realize their personal goals and to pursue their personal passions so that they can become productive members of this society and contribute in the way that is best for their suiting? Do we want to live in a country where we prioritize that And we make it so that people can just do that without having to worry about going broke and being bankrupt and paying a student loan debt for the first 10 to 20 years of their working life after they graduate. So you've got these people who are literally sitting on a whole lot of money. They're making a whole lot of money. They're making a whole lot of money from this system being exactly the way it is. And they got there when this system was not as deeply unequal as it is today. And they know this. These people are not unintelligent. They ain't stupid people. They just slick. Please don't think that these people don't understand the difference between socialism and Sanders policies. Yes, they do. They know that Bernie Sanders policies are not socialism. They know that because they vote for the United States government to destroy actual socialist governments and to depose actual socialist leaders in other countries all around the world. They know full well what socialism is, and they know socialism works for the people. The difference is socialism will make it so that they feel like they can't be as rich. It's not that no rich people can exist in a socialist system, right? It's that in a socialist system, you can't be so rich that you exploit people and become even more rich off of exploiting people through the purchase of land, through the privatization of services, through the privatization of a country's resources for the profit of a few. Socialism does not allow that. Sure, you can be rich. Sure. You just can't be a greedy, exploitative, fat cat capitalist in a socialist system. And these people know this. That's why their heads are exploding. Their heads are exploding because they honestly don't want to give up any of their wealth so that the rest of us can have anything more than what we have. That really is the bottom line with these establishment Democrats people. And let me explain to you where this comes from. I have to put my glasses back on because now I have to read. And I am going to publish this as an article. I am also behind on publishing my own articles. Excuse me, because if you have been listening to us on By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio, you will know that I have been given the opportunity to do a monologue at the top of every show every day. And I don't know why these people let me talk for 10 minutes at the top of every show, but they did. God bless them. And I've been having a good time doing some monologues. So you know how I love history. But, the Democrats, so I share a lot of the history of how we got to where we are. And these Democrats, the Auntie Maxines and the James Carvilles and the Chris Matthews and all, the Hillary Clintons, especially her, and the Barack Obamas, let's not forget him. These people all came out of the strategy that was created by the Democratic Leadership Council back in the 80s. Let me look and see when it was. Yeah, it was 1985. That was the year I graduated high school. Lord have mercy. I didn't know nothing about this stuff then. Had no idea what was going on then. But that's when it happened. The Democratic Leadership Council was founded by Al Fromm in 1985 after Walter Mondale lost a shameful defeat to Ronald Reagan in the 84 presidential election. Who else was involved in the founding of the DLC? Oh, a couple of Democratic politicians you may have heard of. Chuck Robb, Democratic governor of Virginia. Bruce Babbitt, Democratic governor of Arizona. Lawton Chiles, he's probably not as well known, Democratic governor of Florida. Senator Sam Nunn, Democratic governor of Georgia, and Representative Dick Gephardt from Missouri. Excuse me. Now, the DLC is important in understanding why we have the Democratic Party today because of the strategy that the DLC implemented. See, they believe that economic populism, and that's what Bernie Sanders' platform is pretty much. It's economic populism. It's making the economy work for most of the people. That's basically what it is. But back in 85, the Democrats didn't think that economic populism was a viable strategy. They didn't want to. I mean, seriously, the Democrats were the party for working class people, for black people, for gay people, for all the marginalized folks. But somewhere along the line, these people were like, no, we have to, we can't lose another election to a Republican like we did to Reagan. So we have to appeal to working class white voters. That's what they said. That was the strategy. They sought to pursue moderate Republican, Southern, and middle class white voters that they lost to the Republicans in the Reagan, in the election to Reagan. So their strategy was to move away from working class policies and advocacy for marginalized groups of people that they were focused on from the 60s to the 80s for 20 years. And what they did was they adopted this strategy called triangulation, which meant to take a position that not only blended the best of each party's views, but also to kind of transcend them to constitute a so-called third option in a political debate. And that is where third way policies came from. So according to Al Fromm, these policies were meant to be different from the traditional policy of the Democratic Party, and they included issues like, and this is what the Democrats advocated for, y'all, deregulation and balanced budgets. They also they supported welfare reform. Remember the Clinton's Welfare Reform Act. They supported, even though they supported the expansion of stuff like earned income tax credits, but they were also opposed to single payer health care. Back in the 80s, they were opposed to that. They also supported charter schools. Even though vouchers didn't exist then, they did support this school choice movement. This school choice movement is not new. It wasn't created by Betsy DeVos. The Democratic Party was for this garbage back in the 80s. Shutting down, taking money from public schools and giving it to charter schools and calling it school choice. Yeah. The Democrats, we know that the Democrats came up with the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Central America Free Trade Agreement. But look, if you're wondering why so many Democrats today are just as war hungry as Republicans are, you can thank DLC policy for that too, because the DLC gave strong support to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Prior to the war, Marshall Whitman, who was Senator Joe Lieberman's press secretary and a senior fellow with Will Marshall's DLC-affiliated Progressive Policy Institute. Be careful of these organizations, these Democratic organizations that call themselves progressive anything. Please look at what these people are about, and if they include anything that remotely looks or sounds like third way policies in their descriptions, they are the children of the DLC, and they ain't your friends. All right. So this Progressive Policy Institute think tank co-signed a letter to President Bush. This is the Democrats now, endorsing military action against Saddam Hussein. During the 2004 primary campaign, Whitman attacked presidential candidate Howard Dean as an out-of-touch liberal because of Dean's anti-war stance. Whitman also called other critics of the Iraq invasion, who were Democrats now, called critics of the Iraq invasion like Michael Moore the loony left. That was a Democrat saying that about anti-war activists. So if you think that resistance to anti-war activism only comes from Republicans, oh no. It absolutely comes from the Democrats too. Let's see. Here's the thing that I really, really want you to learn, want you to know about the DLC. One of the most destructive strategies and lasting policies of the DLC is the abandonment of addressing the needs of working class, poor, black, and other marginalized voters. This can probably be best reflected in a 1986 speech by DLC chairman Governor Chuck Robb of Virginia. I remember how much people loved that man. Chuck Robb said, and this is a direct quote from him: "While racial discrimination has by no means vanished from our society, it's time to shift the primary focus from racism, the traditional enemy without, to self-defeating patterns of behavior, the enemy within." That's Chuck Robb making a speech in 1986 about respectability doctrine, about basically policing. We Democrats need to focus on helping black people behave themselves better. That came from a Democrat. The DLC thus reshaped Democratic policies to back away from government initiatives to address poverty, discrimination, and crime for the traditional conservative and neoconservative push for opposing affirmative action, opposing social safety net programs, and opposing job creation initiatives. The New Democrats of the DLC added their voices to the chorus of those calling for stiffer prison sentences, an end to affirmative action, reduced welfare benefits, and less progressive tax policies. That's the Democrats, y'all. That is your Democratic Party and what they have been advocating for since 1986. So when you see these Democrats today losing their shit because Bernie Sanders, the crazy socialist, who's not actually a socialist, won Nevada and could be the head of the Democratic Party in the 2020 election, it's because Bernie Sanders is trying to take the Democratic Party back from the DLC. That's what he's trying to do. He is not trying to implement socialism. I think it is important that we recognize that while Bernie Sanders' policies are good, they absolutely are great. They're what we should have. It's common sense stuff, right? It's not like Bernie Sanders is trying to, give the control of the means of production to all of the workers in every. He's not trying to nationalize, excuse me, every corporation and manufacturing outfit in this country. No, that's socialism. Sanders isn't trying to do that. Giving people a livable wage, Medicare for all, eliminating crippling student loan debt. He just released his housing policy. I haven't looked at it, but I hear it's pretty good. The Green New Deal is a good thing. It's a very good thing. These are all good things. These are all basic human rights focused policies. If we believe that access to that healthcare, if we believe that healthcare, education, and housing are human rights, if we believe that, then Sanders' policies aren't radical. They're not revolutionary. I'm sorry to tell y'all, they're really not. They're basic human rights stuff. And the establishment Democrats are losing their minds, and you need to see it, because what they're telling you is that they don't give a damn about your human rights. And I'm not sitting here telling you this, telling you that you should leave the Democratic plantation and go to the Republicans, because they don't care about your human rights either. They're just blatant. They're just blatant about it. Like, the GOP didn't have to create another organization to craft this shady strategy to not give a damn about people. The GOP are just like, we don't give a damn about you. The GOP is just very clear. Like, if you are not rich and white, we don't care about you. So the Democratic Party is facing a crisis. Excuse me. Told you that tea was amazing. They're facing a crisis of, I don't know, conscience. They're facing having what are they going to do about their own identity, what they want to be as a party. And the DLC, the Democratic Party that the DLC created, the Clinton Democratic Party, the Democratic Party that Obama benefited from, because Obama was a beneficiary of the DLC policies also. He ain't give a damn about y'all neither. And I have to admit that I had to learn that after voting for the guy and realize, no, he's just the black face of white neoliberalism and white imperialism of the Democratic Party. That's all he was. So the Democratic Party is now having to fight for its own identity. And the people who have profited the most off of the Democratic Party's identity as the result of the Democratic Leadership Council third way neoliberal, race neutral, gender neutral policies, they don't want to give up their benefits, y'all. They don't want to give up their benefits, and they don't want you and me to have any more than we have. They want us to keep voting Democrat because they want to keep getting a check, but they don't want us to have any more. So they're losing their minds, and I think we need to see that. I'm glad that people are seeing people like Chris Matthews on MSNBC comparing Bernie Sanders' win in Nevada to the Nazis, to the multiracial, multi-generational, multi-class. There's working class folks there, there are poor people, there are middle class folks in Sanders' coalition. They're young, they're old, they're black, Latino, white, all kinds of different folks in Bernie Sanders' coalition. And Chris Matthews is going to sit there and say that the Bernie Sanders coalition that took Nevada is like the Nazis storming France. That mug said that. I mean, I couldn't even be mad because I was so just giddy that people finally see how hateful these Democrats really are. You need to see this, y'all. It's a beautiful thing. Truth is a beautiful thing. I think it is. So, I'm not going to prognosticate, I think that's the right word, over about how Sanders is going to do in the rest of the primaries. We got a long way to go. And I'm hearing some ads that Bloomberg has spent $3 billion in black media for that, if people are not paying attention to social media and other things, then they're going to believe that Bloomberg is their friend. If some black voters get all their news from black radio, they're going to hear these ads from Mike Bloomberg, and he's talking a good game. He's paid some black people a lot of money to tell a bunch of bullshit lies about what a godsend Mike Bloomberg was for black people in New York City. And some black people are going to hear this stuff, and they're going to believe that Bloomberg is their friend, and they're going to vote for him. It's going to happen. Bloomberg is not going to go away. Bloomberg is tapping into a media market that a lot of other candidates have ignored, and that is the black press, what's left of it, and black media, black gospel radio stations in the South. We talked about that on By Any Means Necessary. So, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do to stop Michael Bloomberg from becoming the nominee, because he has enough money to blanket everybody's airwaves with a bunch of lies about him. But make no mistake, the Democratic Party they don't hate Bernie Sanders. No, they hate you and me. That's who they hate. I mean, they go back to work with Bernie Sanders after this election, and what changes for them? Nothing. But then there are all these people who have become aware that something is wrong in the Democratic Party, and all these people are now angry at the Democratic Party. And good, vote all those mugs out. Midterms are coming. Vote them all out. That's why you needed to see this from these people. I know y'all love y'all Auntie Maxine Waters, but she needs to go too. So, okay. moving on, Nevada was a beautiful thing because it did expose the Democratic establishment for the hateful class traitors that they are. These are a bunch of rich people who don't care about working class and poor people. Stop thinking they're your friends. Malcolm X said, stop letting these people treat you like political trumps. Stop letting them do it. And you're not a political chump just because you vote for the Democrats, because the Republicans like to use that quote from Malcolm X's ballot or the bullet speech to tell black people that Malcolm was saying that black people were political chumps because they vote Democrat. No, Malcolm said that he wasn't a Republican, he wasn't a Democrat, he wasn't even an American. He is a victim of Republicans. He's a victim of Democrats. He's a victim of Americanism. He was at the time, this is what he said, I'm one of 22 million African Americans I'm one of 22 million black people who are the victims of Republicans. I am one of 22 million black people who are the victims of Democrats. I am one of 22 million black people who are the victims of Americanism. That's what Malcolm X said, that the Republicans don't ever tell you when they trot out his words about black people voting for the Democratic Party being political chumps. No, read the whole speech. Look up the entire ballot or the bullet speech by Malcolm X. And understand that Malcolm was indicting the entire two-party political system. And at the end of his life, when he came back from Mecca, Malcolm X was working to organize black people to register as independents and to cultivate and run our own candidates to set our own political agenda. You know they had to kill that man. They couldn't let him do that. So that's just a little bit of extra history for you. So now let's talk about Bernie Sanders real quick, because I'm very concerned that Sanders. I don't like the Bernie bro smear. It's a smear. It really is. And I certainly don't like the crazy, hateful, misogynistic crap that Jason Johnson, or whatever that dude's name is, said about black women who support Sanders. I do have a problem with people who make this whole election about a personality. And I don't care who that personality is. I don't care if the personality is Sanders or Bloomberg or Warren. I'm suspicious of people who cape hard for a person and don't cape as hard for policies. I understand that a lot of people were not aware that these policies were even possible until they heard Bernie Sanders talk about them. And this is a problem that I always have with folks in this country and our lack of historical knowledge. We don't like history, so we think Bernie Sanders came up with this with this stuff. Bernie Sanders did not come up with any of these policies. None of these policies are new. These are not his. There have been so many people before Bernie Sanders who have advocated for these kinds of policies. And it bothers me when people make this all about Bernie. It's the Bernie revolution. Oh, we need Bernie Sanders. Somebody on our page commented the other day saying that all we need to do is elect Bernie Sanders and we can address all of the problems in the world. Get the hell out of here with that foolishness. There is no one politician on this planet anywhere who can address all of the problems in the world, first of all. Second, can we not elevate Bernie Sanders to Messiah status? He ain't Jesus. That man is not going to fix all the problems in the world. Listen, with the Congress being under Republican control, if the Congress isn't flipped with not just Democrats, but progressive-minded Democrats, he's going to have a problem implementing the policies that he wants to implement right here. And let's not even talk about Bernie's little imperialism problem. Because as great as Bernie Sanders' domestic policies are, his foreign policies are garbage. Okay? I'm just going to say it. You're not going to like it, but it's true. Anytime you have an American politician, any of them, all of them, I don't care who it is, calling Nicolas Maduro the rightfully and democratically elected leader of Venezuela a dictator, and calling Juan Guaido, who nobody voted for anything, didn't get one vote for nothing, the rightful president of Venezuela, you got a serious imperialism problem. The Venezuelan people are under siege by the United States government's repeated attempts at trying to overthrow the Bolivarian revolution that kicked the United States out and the global interests out of the country, to nationalize the resources of that country for the benefit of the people for decades. Decades. It didn't just start with Maduro. And the largely working class and poor black people don't understand how black Venezuela and Cuba are. The largely working class and black people who voted for the leaders they want are constantly under siege by U.S. imperialist policies, either through coups, repeated military and political coups that the United States tries to implement to get rid of those leaders that those people wanted, or through sanctions against those countries and against countries that do trade with them, that cripple those countries' economies. Then you've got the American politicians who push those things and vote for those policies, and the American media calling those leaders dictators and authoritarian. But I don't understand how people think you can maintain leadership of any country and hold off the most powerful military in the world, backed by one of the largest economies in the world. How do you do that without drawing a very hard line in the sand over what you will tolerate in your government and what you won't? Because, see, people like a fat check. And if you're trying to implement socialism in your country to benefit the people, which is what is done in Venezuela, Venezuela just completed a program to provide 3.5 million to build 3.5 million homes, housing units for Venezuelan people. Free and affordable housing. Nobody's homeless in Venezuela. Can we say that here? But Bernie Sanders calls Nicolas Maduro a dictator? Really? So, Bernie Sanders was also in support of Obama's drone programs. His reasoning was, well, it's better than conventional war. Tell that to the people who are on the receiving end of those bombs that are guided by those drones. Those people don't care whether the U.S. military, through people with guns, boots on the ground, are coming into their communities and shooting them up, or whether the United States is sending a bomb through a drone they don't want to be at the receiving end of the United States military's imperialist, militaristic ambitions. They don't want to anymore. And any politician who cannot muster up the intestinal fortitude to stand up against the military-industrial complex and be willing to no longer vote for U.S. military intervention in other countries' affairs. If people elect a leader in another country that they want, let them folks have their leader. Here's what I don't understand. How is it that people are convinced that Russia interfered in this election, and people are they're losing their minds about it, but somehow it's okay that the United States will literally kill another country's leader to get rid of them because the leaders in this country don't like the socialism that they're implementing in that country. And then the very same people turn around and accuse this watered down democratic socialist, who honestly is just as much of an imperialist as the rest of them. They're going to accuse him of being a socialist. So you can't have a living wage and free tuition and free college. I mean, so I need for us to be very mature about politics and policies. If people love Bernie Sanders, okay, that's fine. You can love Bernie Sanders, that's fine. But please don't elevate him to the status of revolutionary messiah. Bernie Sanders is not a revolutionary. He's a reformist. And there's room for that. There's need for that. Okay. But he's not a revolutionary. And he's not going to solve all the problems in the world if he's elected president. He's not going to solve all the problems in this country if he's elected president. I think he will do some good things, which is why he should be elected president. I think if you are talking about the things that need to happen just within the lane of electoral politics, sure, Bernie Sanders should be elected president. And don't make it just about Bernie Sanders, y'all. Because don't forget, you also have to flip Congress. All of it. All of them. If these people are not for progressive policies, they all need to go. You need to do that. So I'm afraid that people are going to, Bernie Sanders is president. And then they just go stop. They just go think the work is over. No, the work is not over. The work has just begun. That's how change happens. You want change to happen, and then you get in a position for the change to materialize, and that's when the real work begins, because then you got to maintain it. So I want us to be real careful. Tell your friends, tell your family, all your Bernie supporting friends and family, Bernie ain't Jesus. You need to not only elect Bernie Sanders, but you also need to elect progressive senators and congressmen. You need to elect progressive mayors. You need to elect progressive council members. I don't believe there's such a thing as a progressive prosecutor. I don't care what anybody says, because the prosecutor works for the state and the prosecutor works for the police. But that's my thing. Everybody in any elected office needs to be inclined toward the policies. No, need to support the policies that you say you want, that you're electing Bernie Sanders for. You cannot just stop at Bernie Sanders. That's what I'm afraid this Bernie Sanders worship is going to do. Don't make that mistake. Don't make the mistake we made with Obama. Don't do that. Elect the first black president and then don't vote in the midterms. Don't do that. And then finally, as I close, because Maurice asked, where's Abdus? He just came home, and I have to make sure that I go so he doesn't eat all of the fried chicken. But listen, y'all know that the Luqmans are socialists. We are not Democrats. We are not Republicans. We don't have a whole hell of a lot of faith in this two-party electoral system. W.E.B. Du Bois didn't have any faith in the electoral system, the two-party electoral system in 1956, and everything Du Bois said then about why he wouldn't vote in 1956 is still true today. Every single thing. There's another piece of homework for you. You have 2 pieces of homework tonight, y'all. Look up Malcolm X's Ballot or the Bullet speech. Look it up and read it, and look up the essay that was published in The Nation, written by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1956, entitled, I Won't Vote. Look that up. Now, I'm not telling you not to vote. That's not my job. It is not my job to tell you whether to vote or not to vote. And I don't believe it's my job to tell you who to vote for. I just want you to be informed with whatever you're going to do with your vote. That's all I want you to do. And it's in that vein that I want you to understand the difference between progressivism and socialism. Because there is a difference. The difference is very important. Now, I'm not saying that progressivism is bad. Progressivism is actually very good. It is the advancement of technology and science and social programs to benefit everyone in society. So progressivism is a set of policies that provides for a robust social safety net for people. And that is very important in this country, along with making sure that people have a living wage, regardless of what job they work, making sure people have access to affordable housing, quality health care, and decent quality education from kindergarten to college. Along with that, a fair and equitable criminal justice system, and all of these other things that we want to move us toward a fair and just society. Progressivism is good to implement those things because that's not where we are now. We're nowhere near that right now. We are governed by oligarchs. We are. People love to use that term when they're talking about rich Russian people who they think have influence in the Russian government, but oligarchs run the government here in this country. This government is a kleptocracy. Look that up too. It's absolutely an oligarchy. And we need to move away from that. Absolutely. Capitalism is exploitive. Capitalism is exploitative, or however you say it. Capitalism exists through the exploitation of people's labor. We're not talking about commerce, just trade. Trade is whatever you want it to be. Trade is you setting the value for your labor, you agreeing on what you will be paid for your labor, not some rich person who is going to tell you how much they're not going to pay you and how many benefits they're not going to give you. And if you don't like it, then you just don't work. That's no. That's not what we want. So commerce is a very different thing from capitalism. Capitalism is the system through which rich people tell you how much they are going to pay you for your labor, and you basically have no say in it. You either take their terms or you don't work and you don't eat. Socialism, excuse me, y'all. Socialism is a system through which the workers determine the benefits of their production, of their labor. The workers have a say in the in how their labor and the resources are used in a socialist system, and the recompense for that labor. In a socialist system, a country's resources are nationalized so that when those resources are traded on the global market, that money comes back and it is used to benefit the people. It's used to pay for housing for the people. It's used to pay for education for the people. It's used to pay for health care for the people. That's why Cuba has some of the best doctors in the world. In the world. Because Cuba is a socialist country where the government uses the resources, the revenue from the country's resources to pay for education, health care, housing. Now, this does not mean that progressive policies that are needed in this country are bad. No, they're not. They're absolutely needed. And a socialist society does not mean that rich people don't exist in a socialist society. Sure they do. Yeah, they can. They just can't be so rich that they exploit people. We talked about this before. There are limits to the amount of wealth that you can have in a socialist system. And if you can look at somebody like Jeff Bezos, who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a minute, you cannot tell me that you don't think it's a good idea to put limits on just how much wealth one person should be able to accumulate, especially when you have a growing homeless crisis in the same country. You have nearly half of the population living at or near either poverty or some type of economic insecurity, where at least 40% of the population can't even cobble together $400 for an emergency. You can't tell me that you don't want some kind of limits on the kind of wealth that a small percentage of the population should be allowed to hang on to without redistributing that wealth equitably for the benefit of everyone else in this society. You can't tell me that you can look at what goes on in this country with these people like Bezos and the 1% and say that you have a problem with socialism. You might not understand socialism entirely. You might think it's communism and that, the state owns everything. Nobody has private property, and there are allegedly no rich people, but human beings, corruption is wherever human beings are. And human beings being the way they are, they're gonna find a way to slip a little bit extra, even in the communist system. But you cannot tell me that you like capitalism because you live in a capitalist society, and how's that working for you? So when I see people say, we have this defeatist idea that, capitalism isn't going away anytime soon. Okay, maybe it's not going to collapse in the next 5 years, but I do not think we will continue to have the kind of capitalist system that we have in this country today, 10 years from now. I don't think so. We can't sustain it. And the capitalists know that. That's why they are pushing so hard against what you want in these policies that Bernie Sanders are advocating. They don't want this system to change. They'll make it about socialism, but that's not really what it's about. They're not afraid of socialism. No, I don't think there's going to be socialism in this country in the next 20 years. Probably not. I could be wrong. I hope I am. Because I want socialism. Trust me, you do. And let me as I close, let me point this out. If socialism were so horrible, explain to me why it is that every African nation that gained its independence from European colonization and voted for leaders that wanted to move the country towards socialism, how come every single one of those African leaders were murdered and socialism was never implemented in those countries? If socialism is so terrible, how come the capitalist powers that be around the world wouldn't just let it happen and let these countries collapse under their own socialist weight? Because they know damn well socialism works, and they don't ever want it to be allowed to work. So that's why they make this argument about Bernie Sanders, about socialism. Now they're throwing out the Russiagate smear. Oh, Russia is Russia supporting Bernie Sanders. You notice how Sanders was the one who said, the only one on the debate stage who said that the candidate with the most delegates should be the nominee for the Democratic Party, and all of the other candidates said no. The very next day, what did the mainstream media start saying? Oh, the Russians are helping Sanders win. The Democratic establishment resistance to Bernie Sanders isn't about Russia. It's not about nobody liking Bernie. It's not about they hate socialism, or they're afraid of socialism, or they don't know what socialism is, or they think Sanders is a socialist. It's not about any of those things. It is all about them not wanting to get up off of their wealth. That's all it is. You and I are a threat to their wealth. Whether you are all in for Bernie Sanders and that's all you want, that's still a threat to their wealth. Whether you're like me and you want socialism, we are a serious threat to their wealth and their power. See, that's another show. But, it's one thing to be a threat to their wealth. It's another thing to be a threat to their wealth and their power. But we're over an hour, and I hear him upstairs eating. I hear him. He's going to act like he's not up there enjoying the chicken, but I know he is. But look, y'all, thank y'all so much for joining me tonight on this episode, of live in Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. I put my glasses on so I can read some of the comments. Hey Eva over on Facebook. Hey Nessa, what's going on? Over on YouTube, Lene and John. Excuse me. Lisa, Maurice, Uncle Brother, everybody, Sam, Parody. Thank y'all. Yes, Sam, I heard that. You were a little late. I talked about that. Thank y'all so much. Sandy over at Environmental Coffee House, we see you, honey. Hey, Bonnie, what's going on? Kim, Mad Black Star, everybody, thank you so much for joining me tonight on this episode of Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. We have a special interview with Margaret Kimberly that we are editing to present to you coming up this week, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for joining me. Consider becoming a patron of Luqman Nation through Patreon. You can find us on Patreon under Luqman Nation, LuqMannation. As always, y'all, be really good to each other. And peace, if you are willing to fight for it.